Thank you, Jabulani. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. So why should tsetse flies remain in protected areas in KwaZulu-Natal? Aren't these horrible, useless things, nasty things that people don't like and bite people? Well, actually, I've never been bitten by a tsetse fly in KwaZulu-Natal. So, when taking a blood meal, tsetse flies can pick up trypanosomes from their hosts. And then if they bite cattle to obtain another blood meal, they can transmit those trypanosomes to cattle. And trypanosomes can cause nagana in cattle. There are two species of tsetse fly in South Africa, and both of them only occur in the northeastern part of KwaZulu-Natal of South Africa. In their distribution range, they occur in a World Heritage Site. There's a Mangaliso Wetland Park. Don't worry. Yeah, don't worry, she has these fits now and again, so she'll come right. It's not nice, actually, but...
Thank you very much. I'm being told by one of our colleagues there, he's a professional and a qualified medical specialist as well. So he's telling me it's fine, there's no need to call an ambulance. She's in good hands. So we can continue. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, thank you. So there are two species of tsetse flies in South Africa. Their area of occupancy is in the northeastern section of KwaZulu-Natal, and they occur in a World Heritage Site, the Mangaliso Wetland Park World Heritage Site, and various Ramsar sites, and other protected areas, and also outside protected areas where there is suitable habitat for breeding of the flies. The heads of state of African countries decided to eradicate all species of tsetse flies from Africa before even an impact assessment was considered. Therefore, a proposal for the eradication of tsetse flies from South Africa was drawn up by the Onderstepoort Veterinary Institute and the International Atomic Energy Agency in the mid-2000s. And this proposal is currently being supported by research work. So how would the eradication proposal be implemented? First of all, the sequential aerosol technique would be used, and this means the whole region would be aerially sprayed on several occasions with the insecticide deltamethrin, which is a broad-scale insecticide. That would then be, the reason for the spraying of deltamethrin would be to suppress the populations of tsetse flies to a level that would allow implementation following that of the sterile insect technique. And this involves the sterilization of hundreds of millions of male tsetse flies using nuclear power, nuclear radiation, and then the subsequent release over the whole area on several occasions of these tsetse flies to suppress all reproduction of tsetse flies. This can happen because female tsetse flies only mate once in their life. So this will eventually cause the extinction of tsetse flies in KwaZulu-Natal, providing the sterilized males far outnumber the wild males. So, why should and may the proposal not be implemented? First of all, tsetse flies and trypanosomes are intrinsic parts of indigenous biodiversity. They are ancient and remarkable animals. Tsetse flies are the only insects that feed and survive entirely on blood. And they are K-selected, rather like humans and elephants, in the sense that each female bears a limited number of live young, which the female deposits one at a time at a stage that is quite close to maturity, to being an adult. Trypanosomes are remarkable animals in that they live in two different types of host, and they evade the host immune systems by changes in their surface glycoproteins. So both the tsetse fly and the trypanosome have become model organisms in cell biology and genetics. Many different invertebrate species prey on tsetse flies. So things like spiders, robber flies, dragonflies, and the like will prey on adults, whereas things like ants will prey on the puparia, the immature stage prior to the development of the adult. And then there are parasitoids of these fly puparia, such as the mutillid wasp and the bee fly. There are many species of these in the region. So what will happen is that the loss of tsetse flies will cause the loss of a food for a lot of invertebrates. Plus, the parasitoids of tsetse flies will be reduced in number, and that may affect the population control of other fly species that those parasitoids might parasitize. So it will affect the population control of other species, and perhaps related interactions between those species, such as competition. Elimination of parasites from an ecosystem has various severe negative ramifications. For example, the natural regulation of top predators, mega herbivores, etc., will be affected because their populations are regulated by diseases and food supply, and not by things like predation. So, natural regulation of some of these species will be affected. And this can strongly affect species interactions and alter the outcomes of competition, which will affect the relative abundances of various species. The elimination of parasites will also affect ecosystem health through the fact that parasites form a large proportion of the species richness of an area. They therefore are very important in the stability of food webs because they increase the number of linkages in food webs, the density of those linkages, the lengths of the food chains within the food webs, and also the nestedness within the food webs. And a reduction in the stability of food webs will reduce the stability of ecosystems. Non-target organisms will be affected. So this is a proposed spray region, and it covers a large part of the Maputoland center of endemism, which is indicated by the cross-hatching here. which is part of the Maputoland-Pondoland-Albany biodiversity, global biodiversity hotspot. So an endemic species within the center of endemism, especially if they're local endemics, could be eradicated by the spray if they are susceptible to the spray. And deltamethrin is a broad spectrum insecticide. So if they are detrimentally affected by the spraying, where can they re-invade the area from or recolonize the area from? There is nowhere. And even if they're perhaps, more widespread, their recolonization of the southern parts might be prohibited via distance, for example, if they're flightless. Even so, any reduction in the numbers of species in these protected areas is unwarranted. We worry about one rhino dying. You know what I'm saying? That's one out of thousands of rhinos. Why not worry about countless numbers of invertebrates, which are so important in ecosystems, dying, even if the species is not made extinct? So I've just put together a few of the endemic or near-endemic species that occur in the Maputoland Center of Endemism and that will be negatively affected by the SAT. They include various genera of flightless grasshoppers and crickets, various fly species. Here are 2 endemic bee flies, various flightless beetles, dragonflies. 50% of the dragonfly species in South Africa occur in the World Heritage Site and in the region. Moths that, and also some butterflies that complete their whole life cycles exposed on trees. They are very vulnerable to insecticides. So this is just a few examples. There also will be negative ecosystem effects. And I'm just giving one example here because of time. We know that the freshwater shrimp, Caridina species, are very susceptible to deltamethrin. We know that from the Okavango Delta spraying. They are the major zoobenthic detritivores in the nutrient-poor freshwater systems like the lakes and the pans in this region, northeastern KwaZulu-Natal. So the big reduction in numbers, or perhaps even the extirpation of these shrimps, will have major effects on the mineralization of detritus in these nutrient-poor systems. Also, these shrimps are the main prey food items in the diet of various fish, or one of the main prey items. They're either the main or one of the main prey items. And the impact of the SAT would mean that there would be a reduction in the growth rate and size of fish populations. This will also have an impact on food security because poor rural people in this region rely on fish for protein. So their food security is going to be impacted. I want to now turn to the legal side, and my co-author, Andy Blackmore, I'm not sure if he's here, really helped with this section. The Constitution of South Africa is the highest law of the land, and in the Bill of Rights is the environmental right, which provides present and future generations to have an environment that is not harmful to their health or well-being, for the protection and conservation of the environment, and for all use of the environment to be ecologically sustainable. Stemming from this environmental right is the National Environmental Management Act and its subsidiary legislation. And this act legislates that the environment, biodiversity, and protected areas are held in trust by the state and need to be protected. The purpose of the Biodiversity Act is to prevent extinction of species, and protected areas are specially protected refugia for species and habitats. the potential implementation of the World Heritage Convention, the potential implementation of the eradication proposal will contravene the World Heritage Convention to which South Africa is a signature. South Africa has the obligation to maintain the outstanding universal value of the Isimangaliso Wetland Park World Heritage Site, which means maintaining the biological diversity of the site, which includes tsetse flies and trypanosomes. South Africa also has a duty to maintain the prerequisite condition of integrity of the World Heritage Site, which precludes the aerial spraying of the World Heritage Site. The African Convention on the Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources requires state parties, of which South Africa is one, because it's a signatory to this convention, to avoid or eliminate risks to biodiversity at the species and the habitat levels. And also, it requires state parties to ensure that development activities and projects do not have adverse effects on natural resources and the environment in general. The SADC Protocol on Wildlife Conservation and Law Enforcement requires each state party, which South Africa is one, to ensure that its wildlife resources are conserved and used sustainably, and to refrain from causing damage to the wildlife resources of other states or in areas beyond the limits of national jurisdiction. So Mozambique, for example, can't require South Africa to eradicate tsetse flies just because it wants them eradicated from its part. I'm just using that as an example. So in conclusion, the implementation of the eradication protocol, or proposal, shall I say, would be contrary to various international conventions and African and South African laws, protecting and conserving biodiversity, would have negative consequences for the conservation of biodiversity, including eradication of indigenous species, negative impacts on ecological and ecosystem processes and services. And there are actually more environmentally friendly strategies to control ngana in cattle. And these are available at present, and also in the future, others will be available because of the great strides that have been made in terms of understanding the biology and the genetics of tsetse flies and trypanosomes.